When Harry Met Sally, a photography podcast, would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of the lands and waters in which we are recording this podcast on today. As people who work with artists seeking meaning and knowledge through storytelling, we recognise the first peoples of this nation have been doing so for over 60,000 years. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging across Australia. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
None of this is possible without the fantastic help we've had from
Collart. Thank you so much for the support on providing your pod suites. Nikon Australia, incredible ambassadors for the photography industry.
And Ted's Camera Store, also great ambassadors, have been around forever and are doing wonderful work. And A&L Artistic Framers, who have been framing photography and art for as many years as I can think. Thank you all so very much. Hello.
Hi, Sally.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So the reason we sound a little bit shocked today, everyone, is because we are doing our first Zoom interview that we have not done before. So there's been a few technical issues and it's kind of weird because we're sitting next to each other.
We are. Normally
like the
we sit across from each other and now we're sitting next to each other. We have to turn to look at each other.
But we are very excited about our next guest, who is zooming in from interstate from Sydney, which is fantastic. And I'm going to let you introduce our guest.
So welcome to the picture editor of The Guardian and extraordinary photographer herself, Carly Earl.
Yay!
Hi, Carly.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks, Carly, and thank you for being so understanding with us, trying to work out how to get all this done on Zoom. But we got there in the end.
That's totally fine. I think I'm morphing into my mother the more I get into tech stuff, and I've realised that I'm ageing much quicker than I thought when it comes to this stuff as well, so it's okay.
Carly, you must have been in our living room last night when I couldn't get onto Binge and work out how to search a movie. I was trying to search White Lotus. And I was just yelled at. That was what was going on. It's like, you run a tech business, like you have computers, and it's like, it's different. I know what I need to know, right?
There's too many remotes these days. More than one remote for me. I'm tapped out.
Absolutely. Well, look, why don't we start off some questions about your role as the picture editor. How did you end up getting into that role, and when did that occur?
I originally started in photography, and so I actually remember the specific moment that I decided I wanted to get into newspapers. I was living in Redfern many, many years ago, and I was studying photography, and I remember seeing something called Central Magazine dropped on my front doorstep, which was a local community newspaper. And I remember stepping over it when I walked into my terrace, and I thought, that'd be a cool job. Like it was the front cover of Central Magazine, and it was something probably with Clover Moore, and the photographer had been able to go with the journalist and shoot the picture to go along with the story, and then it was the same photographer through the whole magazine.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. You get to work with journalists, you get to work in the media, but there was something a bit more lifestyle-y, I think, about that magazine at the time. Central was definitely more of the lifestyle editorial side of things. So after I saw that, I was currently working at a pub in Sydney and found out that one of my patrons was working at News Corp. And so I essentially hassled her until I could get free internships at News Corp. And so
amazing.
I was working under a couple of really amazing picture editors at News Corp, and Jeff Darmanian was one of them. And he took me under his wing, and I started out in community newspapers. And so I went to the Penrith Press, I went to the Macarthur Chronicle, I went to the Manly Daily. I travelled all across Sydney and got to cover every single newspaper and have experience photographing different areas. So that's where the joy of news and photo media was born.
And you were working as a photographer, shooting.
I was working as a photographer. Yeah, I was working as a photojournalist.
After study, or did you start making these contacts while you were still studying?
I was still studying when I think I was there for free, and then I think by the time I got my first paycheck, I probably wasn't studying anymore. So I started paying my HECS debt off immediately. So that really grew this love of the intensity and the pace of the media and not knowing what you were going to experience and getting to get out on the road. And I loved that. I love the pace of it. I love the creativity of photography and that side of things. But seeing how that worked and married up in print media was really exciting at the time for me. And then I pushed on after that, working under Jeff, and he was fantastic in the way that he nurtured my photography and gave me many experiences. And then I moved into the metropolitan newspapers, which was often a bit of a trajectory for young photojournalists. They would go from community news and move up into the metropolitan papers, which added a lot more stress and a lot more anxiety.
Bigger organisation and more pressure?
More pressure and tight deadlines. So Central Magazine was a weekly, and the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, you found that the pressures for that, obviously for the dailies, were so much faster. Like you would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and potentially do 3 photo shoots in a day, sometimes 4, which could potentially go on the front page the next day, depending on how good the shots were, particularly with breaking news. And so I think the adrenaline of that and just the broad mix of photography that you got to experience was amazing.
And ultimately, was it sustainable working that hard?
Well, it turns out that my job now is proving much more difficult.
There it is, a good grounding. That's what we'll say. We'll go with that, shall we?
Yeah. It's I think anybody who has worked in that industry understands the pace of it, and what it can do is it can really squeeze creativity. I think the faster that you have to move, the less headspace there is for creative thought. So obviously the less photo shoots that you have, the more you can embrace your creative side and get some flair into your own style. Yeah. I think the faster it moves, the harder it is to retain that.
Okay, so as a shooter, you've been doing all of that, and that sounds amazing, and you got to travel. Did you travel overseas in any projects, or was it all local news that you've worked on?
No, I've travelled overseas for The Guardian. And travelled interstate for The Guardian. So not until I moved across to The Guardian have I done more national and international coverage. But in terms of my photography, it has really shifted. I mean, now that I've moved into picture editing and sort of managing a big photographic team now and picture editors, there is less opportunity for me to get on the road.
Yeah, and that was a big question that Harry and I were talking about before. Like, how do you manage that being a photographer? And, well, there's 2 questions here. Why did you go into a full-time role as a picture editor when you're a photographer? And then I'll ask the second question. So that's the first question.
Okay, so the reason I went into picture editing as a photographer was probably fear. I could see the industry changing very quickly. I started trying to diversify while I was at News Corp. I also started a small production company with one of my closest friends, Rebecca, and we started shooting video content as well. We were working with a woman called Saffron Howden who was doing a kids' newspaper called Crinkly News, and we were shooting all the video content for that, which was great. But I just realised that the pool of photographers was shrinking, and redundancies had already started happening while I was there. And these weren't, one or 2 a year. They were doing mass redundancies. And
when was this, Carly? What time period was this?
Oh, my gosh, I'm so bad with dates.
Not specifically, but just in general.
That would have been around 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Around a decade ago. And so community news was wiped pretty quickly in terms of the amount of photographers they had. They would used to have a photographer per paper, and you would go out on every job with the journalist, regardless of what it was. You then had one photographer per 3 papers. They would often just pick the main shoots that had to be done, and you just saw the industry just really sort of squishing down. When that happened, I think that's when I realised I had to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, do you know, you're spot on with the time. It started about 11 years ago. So and I remember because my mum had passed away, and then I had all of these photojournalists contacting me about how do I put a folio together? How do I quote on jobs? Everyone's being made redundant. We've got no work. And there was this whole industry of photographers that was hugely talented, but had actually never quoted on jobs and gone out to find work because they'd always been photojournalists. So, yeah, you were spot on with the timing, and it's so you've made a really smart decision. I think those decisions are not easy to make, but you were really on the forefront of thinking about the future and really understanding what was happening. So good for you. And how are you finding it as a picture editor?
It's amazing. I could not be in a job that would suit me more. It is a phenomenal job to have. It's extremely challenging. It is, The Guardian is a national news organisation, but I also manage the Pacific region and New Zealand at the moment as well in terms of picture editing. So the breadth of what I'm covering is getting bigger. The department is getting bigger. Everything is getting bigger and busier. And I think also as well, as a picture editor, the thing that you probably aren't prepared for is the amount of relationships that need to be maintained at a consistent level. So you are maintaining consistent, strong relationships with the photographers that you respect and like and want to continue working with. You're maintaining your relationships with the journalists and making sure that you're delivering on a product of what they need. You're maintaining working relationships with management to make sure that you can convince them that you need more budget to get this amazing shoot out of this product because you can see something great that could come out of it. So it's a lot of people management now and a lot of the creativity in the photography side of things also can come out with your commissioning. So working with photographers on bigger projects and commissioning is really exciting because you get to work with them about what you want to achieve in the end goal.
So how much input do you have? Like if you're working on a story with a photographer, how much input do you have in the actual creative process of that? Or do they go out and make the photos and then you're really making the story in the editing process afterwards? Or are you kind of working together with kind of what photos you need and what angles you need taken and where the story is going before they've actually taken the photos?
I think it depends who you're working with. If you're working with photographers who have a long-standing history with you and you know the product and you know exactly what you're going to get by commissioning them, you don't tend to push too hard. I want to let the photographers that I'm hiring have the creativity to go out and enjoy what they're doing, and they're experts in their field, which is why we're hiring them for that specific job. Often there might be bigger projects where I'll have photographers come to me with a pitch and say, listen, I think I've got something here. I just need to mould it into something and I can't quite figure out what that is. And so you might spend some time sitting down and looking over a huge breadth of work and narrowing it right down for a photo gallery or a photo essay that they've been working on for a long time. I think the day-to-day commissions, which can happen a lot, we've got a quick portrait here, we've got a quick assignment here, those ones, depending, I think, on the category. So when you're talking about breaking news, sometimes you are just going and getting a case study of something and we need a really strong, hard-hitting portrait. But we also have lifestyle, we have culture, we have Indigenous investigations, we have, breaking news. It's because the breadth is so massive. Let's say lifestyle's doing a story on, people with super senses. Then all of a sudden you'll be talking to Alana Holmberg and saying, like, how can we make this person appear like they have a super sense? Like, how can we amplify this idea of that? And you can really have a lot more fun with it. And then you've got other jobs where you're just sending people into cyclones and just saying, go and get me the
Hold on. Hold on.
Hold on.
Don't lose your cameras. I've got a couple of questions. I seem to always have a couple of questions. I wanted to know, so are all of these photographers on a salary at The Guardian, or are you also working with freelance photographers, or are they all freelance?
So what's unique about The Guardian is that all the picture editors are photographers. So I'm a photographer, Ellen Smith is a photographer, and Blake Sharp-Wiggins is a photographer. We have two casuals who work with us, Beck Lorimer and Jessica Romas, who are also both photographers. But apart from that core team, everybody else is freelancers. So we don't have any photographers on the books. We had Mike Bowers doing an amazing job for us for over a decade, and he was working with us as a staff member. He's now doing some freelance work for us on the side, but everybody is freelance except for the picture editors / photographers.
That's so interesting. That's a really different way of working to other news organisations. Has that always been the way at The Guardian, that the picture editors are all photographing as well? Is that kind of historically been the way, or is that something that this new team has kind of implemented?
I think when I came on board, I was a photographer, and because there was just me, I think it was a product of necessity.
Yeah, okay.
There were so many shoots coming through, and when The Guardian first started, having a huge photographic budget wasn't the priority. The priority was just to sustain the website and make sure that we could survive. And essentially I came in, and as a photographer, I said I needed a kit and I needed to be able to shoot as well, because the demands that were starting to come onto the department we didn't have the budgets to facilitate it. And obviously with an organisation, when they're first starting out somewhere, you just need a very core team of people to get it to hum. And then once it starts humming, you can then develop that and build your budgets into it. And so I think because I was a photographer and I thought that was really important to my role about being able to communicate with other photographers and also have a level of understanding for these people about how long it's going to take, what kind of creative input you can give them without completely squashing their idea. And also just the technical side of things as well. You can imagine things as a picture editor of what you want, but whether it's achievable or not at 4:00 in the afternoon in Melbourne versus Sydney with no studio lighting, like you have to be able to understand that to a certain extent. So I think then off the back of that, I really was looking for either picture editors who had a very keen interest in photography and wanted to develop that here at The Guardian, or people who already were photographers. But it's a tricky spot to fill. You don't find a lot of picture editors who shoot, and you definitely don't find a lot of photographers who want to sit behind a desk. Yeah. So finding that relationship between the two, there are not a lot of people out there who do both.
And so, Carly, when a job comes in, do you get to handpick the great shoots that you want to do, or how does that work?
I think I've done that once in the last 12 months.
And what was the job?
I managed to go out to the middle of North Queensland and go droving for a few days.
Oh, saw those shots, yeah.
So we had a great story which was out of the Rural Network, which is a section of The Guardian, and this story came up about droving, and I was a keen horse rider for 15 years, and I just said, I'll do that. Yeah. And that was something which I could go and embody my photography for 3 days and really immerse myself. I have 2 very small children at home, which means that travel these days is a lot more challenging for me. And I find that with a role where you are managing a department, leaving that seat becomes a lot more challenging because the work will just wait there for you when you come back. So I have found that predominantly since I've had kids and been moving into more of a managerial position, I've given the opportunities to my deputy and my assistant picture editor in Melbourne. Just because of time, to be honest. It's just the workload's too difficult to step away for that amount of time.
Earlier on you were talking about different areas within The Guardian, and one of the things you mentioned was Indigenous investigations. We've been recently had conversations with some Indigenous photographers, and I'm just wondering, do you work with the Indigenous photography community to photograph these stories?
Yeah, so it's tricky. We work with Michael Torres quite a bit.
He's on the podcast this season.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
He's so great.
He is fantastic.
So Michael's been a bit of a touch point for me to try to access more Indigenous photographers who can work alongside The Guardian for these specific stories. And what we've come up against in terms of that is often location. So Michael himself is up towards Broome. And so what I've found in many situations is you're often trying to source those photographers, but in terms of location, a lot of people aren't in the right spots at the right time. And so I think that is one of the big goals for The Guardian, to try and make sure that we are getting more diverse and Indigenous photographers working with us in the future. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to contact me and is interested in working in The Guardian, please let me know, because that is a big part of what we're moving towards over the next 12 months, to try and align those sort of morals with who we're getting to shoot the projects along with the copy.
Yeah. And it's so important, like these offers that come out, like get in contact with me, they're genuine offers. And they're, I think a lot of people when they're sort of younger or emerging, they feel like they can't sort of, put themselves out to the picture editor of The Guardian. But, the offer is there and people need photographers and you've just got to go for it. And you yourself did that when you were just coming up, I really like the story of you, seeing that newspaper and having that person from News Corp in your bar and just hounding them until you could get your foot in the door. And maybe hounding's the wrong word, but this is what you have to do.
I won't give you a drink until you give me a job, right?
So no, it was definitely hounding. You can use that word. It was hounding.
That's a fantastic offer, Carly. Can I just ask, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Is it an email address or?
Email address. So if anyone is listening and is keen to get in touch in terms of letting me see your portfolio, if you're someone who is in in the news cycle or is keen to kind of cut their teeth and maybe sort of work alongside some of our photographers who we always work with to build up their portfolios, my email address that you can contact is carly.earl@theguardian.com.
Great.
Fantastic.
That's
and do they need to be
amazing
Sydney-based
info.
or they can be anywhere in Australia?
They can be anywhere. And that is a genuine call out, because the other thing that I found is that what you find as well, working in the news cycle, things are often running at such a pace that you will be in the middle of trying to commission a project and you've got photographers that you've worked with consistently before, and you have to find the balance between giving those photographers enough work that they respect the organisation and want to deliver for you, but also diversifying enough with your freelance base to make sure that you have men and women and good diverse hires to make sure you are actually supporting the next generation of photographers who are coming up too. That's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. And I think Harriet touched on what an extraordinary opportunity this is. So anybody that is listening, I think we're also where we're in a scenario now where we're dealing with kids that are coming out of colleges that were COVID affected. They are quite shy. They're probably a little bit not as understanding of networking as previous generations that have come through, and it's a real education process about letting these up-and-coming photographers and creatives know that a story like yours is exactly what it's all about. It's about talking, it's about networking, it's about, right, that person in my bar, I want to something, that they have so I can have a conversation with them. So it is a really extraordinary opportunity, and my great belief is people don't offer those things unless they really mean them. And the great thing is that, there could be 1,000 people apply, but really there's probably only going to be 4 or 5 really hungry ones, and they're the ones that you want, right? That are hungry.
They're the ones who are going to email me 6 times before they get a reply, because the reality is that it's not that we're not reading the emails, it's just that potentially it's been missed because there's so many emails coming through.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's about hounding, and I think that's how I started, was just the hustle. How do I get in front of this person? How do I talk to this person? I want to do this shoot. How do I get that story in there? Like, just being confident to know that whatever your unique photographic style is right now is intrinsically you. And if you just keep hounding that and sticking with it and staying with it and keep pitching it forward, don't try to sort of merge yourself into some trend, or you see some other photographer and you wanted to sort of mimic that because you feel as though that's what's working at the moment. Like, just stick to your guns, stick with your style, and just keep pushing to the right people if you can figure out who it is.
I just had a guest speaker come into my class at Photography Studies College this week, Issa Musawa, who is on season 1 of our podcast as well. And he said, with regards to assistants and hiring new assistants, he said, email me every Monday morning. And he said, I might not respond, or, I might get back to you and say that there's nothing. But he said, I just tell them to email me every Monday. And in 6 weeks' time, there might be 1 or 2 people still emailing, but that job will come in where I need them, and they're the person that I hire. So, yeah, it's that thing of be respectful, but be tenacious and just keep going and put yourself out there, because everyone will fall away. And if you're the one that's left standing there, then you're going to get that foot in the door.
Yep, I 100% agree.
And so, Carly, you mentioned your droving story, which I've seen some of those images and they're beautiful. Have you got any other stories that you've either worked on yourself or that you've commissioned out to other photographers that have been, hugely rememberable?
I think the other one that I shot myself was a series that we did on Blacktown in Western Sydney. And this was a 3-part series that unpacked just one area of Western Sydney and what about it was making it unique. And there was an angle culturally, an angle politically, what was happening with families in this specific area. And that was a project I decided to throw myself into 100% as well. And that gave me a lot of incredible creative freedom. And I loved immersing myself in those projects and meeting the characters as I could, because I think with time, you just get so much more enriching content if you've got time to sit with the subjects, sit with the narrative, what's the story, sort of following them home. And that was probably another significant project for me, the Blacktown series. And it was gosh, that was probably about five years ago now, but it's really stuck with me because I feel as though those key moments that I managed to capture for the lead image for each one was quite different, but used really bolshy, strong colours, and the characters just really breathed through all of it, I think.
So just like on that kind of topic of sort of long form photographic projects and journalism, is there still space for that kind of work in news media at the moment?
Yeah, it's getting tougher. It's getting tougher to have places that can publish those works. I think The Guardian is definitely a place that still does that. I mean, we are one of the only, if not the only website, I would say, in terms of Australian media, who 100% takes pictures from photographers, not pictures, P-I-T-C-H, pictures, yes, from photographers, and tries to make them as beautiful as we possibly can. And there is still a space for them where we construct it on desktop, and we have to check what it looks like on mobile, but we do it all on desktop, and we do big showcase images and immersive images. And I think there is still a place for them, but the problem is financially, how does that work for photojournalists? How do you fund a long-term visual project that might get published with us, but what's the future for those visuals afterwards? So, you know, a lot of photographers will try and get their stories published in a big media organisation like ours, but I think the question you have to ask yourself is there a life for those images also afterwards? What's your exclusivity days that you have with that specific organisation? Can you sell the images on internationally if you think there is a story there? Is there a book in it? Is there a magazine that you can pitch it to? There is scope for that, but it's tough. And photographers also need to be able to have the time to think about that project and then come to picture editors and take it to them and sell it to them and say, what do you think? And then they have to be able to produce it while also trying to produce enough work to sustain their mortgage and taking care of their kids.
So really it's about, I suppose there's been a big shift in that, you know, back in the day, the magazines and newspapers would employ the photographer to make the work, whereas now they're really doing it off their own backs and then pitching it to organisations.
Yep.
And on that note, Carly, where does The Guardian sit with copyright of the images?
So what happens is if a photographer comes to The Guardian and it's their idea, so essentially any photo that's taken with The Guardian, it is always their copyright. Even if they work for the organisation. So all the images that I take with The Guardian, even though I'm a full-time employee, the copyright is still mine, but they will have indefinite rights to these images, right? So, but what that means for freelancers is that if they come to us with a pitch and they say, I've got this incredible idea for a photo project, and I say, sell it to me, and I go, great, let's do it. The copyright not only stays with them, but we only are licensing it for one-time use. And then we'll come up with an agreement about how many days that exclusivity rights will be for. And then we have it for one-time use, or we have it for multiple uses if we think there could be a follow-up story down the track. But often it's one-time use and that's it. Whereas if we commission a photographer and it is a story that The Guardian owns and it is their case study or their story or their group of people that we are talking to, the photographer still owns the copyright, but we have an indefinite license on those images. So we can reuse those images how we see fit. And often they will just be repurposed into a story of the same person.
And is the photographer also allowed to use those images again?
Yeah. In what capacity?
So if they wanted to exhibit them, for instance, or if they wanted to sell them as prints or...
Yeah, I mean, often we find that with the Guardian content that we're getting photographers to work with, a lot of that content, I would say, isn't necessarily sellable. A lot of it's quite heavy news. So you'll often find that it would be rare, I think, that you'd find photojournalists wanting to kind of make money off those particular portraits or anything after the fact just because of the narrative of the content in the first place. And also particularly when it comes to Indigenous affairs, every single image that is taken with The Guardian is explicitly only one-time use only unless the person or the subject matter has agreed to any use after that. That includes photographers entering images into competitions. They have to go back to the people and ensure that there is a very clear conversation about what they're intending to do with their image afterwards. But holistically, they can exhibit the photos if they want to put it in a magazine or a book or something like that and sell that on, of course they can do that. They
Fantastic. It's just good for people that are listening that are unsure. It's the sort of question that can be a little bit muddied a lot of the time, and not everybody does the right thing by photographers and copyright. So that's really great for us to hear you, to talk about how it works. It's great.
So I sort of following on from that note, I would like to talk about, like, in your sort of bio and where you're sort of written up, there's a very clear kind of message that you advocate for the people that you are working with. And I'm assuming that is kind of photographers as well as your subjects as well. And I think, like, there are a lot of buzzwords that go around at the moment, and advocation is one. But I'd love to really hear from you about kind of what that means to you as someone that's kind of working with photographers and standing up for their rights, but also working as a photographer with, maybe people that you are advocating for as your subjects as well.
I think that anyone who's working as a picture editor in print media now, I would say probably unless you're working for the New York Times, you are elbowing your way into making sure that photos get breathing space. And that's whether that is on websites or whether that is in print. You are fighting for the best image of a collection of a product that you have commissioned out to. And so you're the voice of reason when it comes to why an image works. And it is your job to be in a newsroom and explain to people who don't have very good visual literacy why that image works and why that should be the standalone and why it shouldn't be cropped and why it should just stand on its own. And that is really difficult because we're working in a very fast-paced, media organisation where stories are changing, things are moving. It's like you constantly have shifting deadlines. And so what I think I've tried to do since starting at The Guardian is create a space where I know that if photographers give me a product, what we publish on the outside of that respects the craft, respects exactly the way that they saw their vision, within the parameters of obviously our publishing specs and stuff we can't alter, but really wanting to let that creative side in a news space still work. I think there's a very big difference between photojournalists who have taken photos of things that's in front of them at an event and photographers that can create magic out of an event. And that skill set to create magic will be the difference of 2 seconds about where you get the frame. It will be the difference of what colour palette you've decided to kind of move into with this portrait. Like it's such a unique talent to get that beat right all the time. And what you're trying to do in a newsroom is explain why that's important. And that was sort of my mission when I started The Guardian. I said, I want this to be the place that photographers want to work with.
Really, that's hugely impressive, and it's wonderful that you've been able to encourage that and that they've supported you in that and that it's working so well. As a photojournalist, you talked about when you first started out, the idea of hanging out with journalists and telling stories and photographing their stories. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the story or the photograph? Or when you're going out to do the photography, does the journalist then write about it afterwards? You're writing it together. Can you just talk a little bit about that for our audience?
It's definitely a case-by-case situation. So sometimes what will happen is we'll have senior editors come to us and say, hey, we've got this great big series coming up soon. And they'll give us the rundown of what it's about. And you can see me and my colleagues' brains going, oh, this is good. Like we can already picture how we're going to craft this out. And so those kind of bigger projects will be a step-by-step situation where we'll say, well, this is what we think we need visually from something like this. And they say, well, this is what we're going to need from the words. And you explain to them that when they're on assignment together, the photographers are going to be looking for something different to what they're looking for. And the time of day that you might want to do the interview is probably going to clash with when we want to do the photos. And so you have to be malleable to allow those photographers to work their space while you're working yours and respecting both crafts. So with the bigger projects, they will go together and try to work as harmoniously as possible. And then with the sort of short, quick jobs, often you'll find these days that if the journalists can't get on the jobs, you'll have photographers sometimes going out solo by themselves. So they'll try to get a really good brief before they head out on the job, and then they'll be able to take that brief or talk to one of the picture editors to get a real understanding of what the feature is. And then we'll say to them, listen, we've looked at the address of the house. The house looks like it could work. At this time of the day, the sun's coming through this window. That could potentially work. There's a warehouse around the corner, which we think could make for a good backdrop of this band shoot. Or because it's so broad, it's very kind of ad hoc and on the fly, depending on what the shoot's for and how quickly we have to turn it around.
You can really just see how much, you are really advocating and supporting your photographers, and how much you, would have to, in your day-to-day, imagine go in to kind of fight for them in many cases, and the work that they're producing.
And I also think, absolutely, Harriet. And then the other thing too is, I don't even know how you do the job as well as you do if you didn't understand photography, right? And that if you didn't understand light, and, can you imagine trying to work with somebody who you're explaining, going like, the light is coming through that window at that time of day, and somebody's going, I don't care, I just want the photograph, So they're very lucky to have someone like you who really gets it, and all of your editors in there, and people that are working with you that are photographers as well. It just makes sense.
Sounds like you've built a really great team
Absolutely.
there. And just from what you were saying before about, you went in as a photographer because you kind of had to shoot, because you had to kind of put yourself on the line. And now it sounds like you've got this great team, and you're like employing all these freelance photographers. It sounds like you've done something pretty amazing there, Carly.
It's going well, and I just have to give a shout out to my team, because they are such incredible, hardworking people who are also wonderfully creative. And Blake, who is my deputy who came on after me, has just worked incredibly hard to build his photographic portfolio up within the Guardian walls. Ellen, who is just an absolute weapon behind the picture desk, but is also pushing her photography at the same time, is doing really well. Jessica Romas is a long-standing casual of ours who's also taken on mat leave contracts with me, is an amazing photographer. And now Beck Lorimer, who's also on as well, who actually used to sort of be more working in the lifestyle fashion area and had a keen interest in news, is just absolutely flourishing in what's a pretty tough space. But I think your intention of what you want to do in this space versus what you can actually feasibly achieve in the hours in your day often might not come off. Like, you have this idea of, I want to do this, and I want to kind of make this space for people, and I want to make it work, and I want people to be happy with the Guardian. And you try your hardest, but there's always going to be times where you're too busy, or it falls over, or you miss that phone call, or you miss that email. And as we've noticed, the Guardian has grown exponentially. And with that, the stretches and kind of intensity on the picture editors has really been strained. So if anyone works with us and they don't get an email back, I'm sorry.
That's right, indeed.
How many hours a day is it, Carly?
I was on meetings last night with London till about 10. So but it's so rewarding. And I think what makes our department unique is the fact that the picture editors can shoot. Right? And so when you have a creative outlet in a job that is predominantly in the office, it gives you respite. It allows you to go out and reconnect with what the job was about initially, and then bring that back into the office. And there's nothing more joyful than having one of your picture editors who's also a photographer get to go on an incredible project, and they come back with a cracking set of images.
Yeah. And that's what we were talking about. It is quite unique, and I think it's fantastic. And my question to you is, who's your boss? Like, who do you answer to? No one, or there's a huge smile occurring here if anybody's interested.
I answer to Lenore Taylor, like everybody at the Guardian, who is our editor in chief, and she is amazing. And I think that anybody who works at the Guardian and works under Lenore, a big part of why you strive to be the best that you can be for the organisation is partly because of her leadership. I think the majority of people think that if, the Guardian and Lenore Taylor weren't attached at the hip, you don't know if you'd be here anymore. But it's like, she's amazing. She's sort of taken the Guardian from, almost nothing to build it into this incredible business, which is really fighting for independent journalism. And, I can't speak more highly of it is.
It all filters down from the top, isn't it? Doesn't it? They say that when I was looking for a school for my son, for primary school, look at the headmistress or headmaster, because if they're doing something right, then that will filter down from the top. And I think it's the same in every organisation.
And do you know what else I've been noticing? All the names I've been writing down, the majority are women that are working in there as well, which is also a bit of a flip, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we did the data on it. I think we did a story recently about this. I think we're sitting at about 68% women in the organisation, which is great. I mean, when we sit in all senior meetings, it's often just ladies. I'm not saying that's the best, but it's the best.
Yeah,
but let's face it.
But it's also, acknowledge it, and because we hear so often that that's not the case. So I'm just looking at the whole list of names. I've got Blake in here. That's it. We've got Blake and the rest. So that's also I feel like the Guardian is really stepping up. It's ahead of its time. It's doing some really extraordinary work and employing great people.
Just before we get to our final question, I just want to ask one thing, and you touched on it a little bit earlier when you very generously gave out your email for anyone who's kind of up and coming. But what is something, if there's sort of young emerging photographers coming out of college, or even someone who's having a bit of a career change and wants to get into something more meaningful and work for something like a news organisation or the Guardian, what would you say is the most important thing that a young up and coming kind of emerging photographer can do to become a photojournalist or have their work published in something like the Guardian?
You're going to have to be very tenacious. You're going to have to be extremely tenacious and committed. The industry, as anyone could tell you, is definitely not what it was before. I mean, I was one of, I think, 44 photographers at News Corp at one point or another. I think the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph, just for example, now are probably down to around 6. So I think what's probably the most important piece of advice is, where do you think you want your photography to take you in a sense? Be really true to your creative side. And if that creativity and the way that you shoot and what you're shooting leads you into art photography, go for it. If you find yourself wanting to be a storyteller, then follow that lead. And if that means you end up in journalism, that's fantastic. If it means you end up in wedding photography, that's fantastic. But if you just stay true to intrinsically what it is that gives you that kick, gives you that buzz, that's going to give you the capacity to keep going until you're successful. I think if you try to flip-flop and say, well, maybe this or maybe that, you're just going to lose the buzz for it.
The momentum, and fall out of love with that passion. Yeah. We get that.
Exactly, but just tenacity.
Oh, well, look, what a positive attitude to finish on. Tenacity, it's a good word.
Yeah.
And you've been a delight to talk to today. I'm, first of all, thrilled that our Zoom meeting has worked out and that we can all hear each other. Yay! We overcame that. And it's been fantastic to be able to really drill down what being a photojournalist's about. And what we'd like to ask every person that we're interviewing this season is, what do you think the future of photography looks like to you, Carly Earl?
More prominent. More prominent. The world of photography and the way that people engage in news, more prominence. I think that you're going to find that news organisations are going to catch on to the fact that visual journalism and access to visual journalism is incredibly important, particularly for a younger audience trying to access news. And the way that people see the world and engage with their media is changing so quickly. And part of that is photojournalism. So I think that we're going to see incredible photographers just producing amazing work when it comes to the media landscape. And when things are changing so rapidly in our world and we're seeing more natural disasters and we're seeing, more war, more crime, more AI, everything just feels intense and big. The one thing that you can hopefully still trust is that photography which lands on prominent news organisations are real, and that is the one thing that you can trust. There is nothing you can do to change a photograph, as long as you have good AI policies at your organisation, which means that you're looking at something that's false. I think trying to find the true identity of something moving forward is is key. And I think for photojournalists, like what they're shooting is real. And so hopefully it's more prominent.
Wow,
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And also my jaw's on the ground as well, because I feel like that's not what I thought you were going to say. And do you feel like, I'm sorry, I know we're going to be ending in a minute, but do you feel like you're on your own with that outlook? Because it's such a bloody great outlook and hugely positive, and that's what we're all about, is positivity and tenacity and all of the things that we've talked about. But yet people are so worried, and everybody's going, photojournalism's gone, and I feel like we're opening up a bit of a can of worms here. But do you feel like you're on your own in that attitude or that comment?
Don't get me wrong, I still worry.
Show us your worried face.
I still worry about, of course, I worry about creatives in that space, obviously, but I think that given what I have seen so far in terms of the media organisations that I affiliate with and we associate with, we have extremely strict policies about what gets seen on our site, and that makes me feel safe. So the photojournalism that we're seeing now, that's not going to go away. And I think that if anything, it will become more important. And I think if anything, it's going to be displayed more prominently. And I think that that's what gives me hope.
Yeah. And you're right. We are such a visually literate world now, aren't we? Young people, old people, grandparents, really old people. Like my dad's nearly 96, and he still will see pictures and comment on them rather than reading the whole story. And so, well, that's fantastic. What a beautiful and fabulous positive note to end on, Harry.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Carly, it's been so wonderful just talking to you and, hearing more about you and your story and just the way you think and how everything's working at the Guardian. It's just you're an inspiration.
You are. You should be hugely proud of what you've achieved. Yeah. And it's been really wonderful to meet you, and also to thank Alan for really saying, contacting us and sort of saying you've got to get Carly on, and
we'll get Ellen on a future season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. We will. Well, thank you so much, Carly. It's been a delight. And we will, see. We'd love to hear as well if anybody does respond to our call out, to your call out. That'd be really cool too. And if they do, we'll get them on.
Yeah.
Hey, what about that?
Always thinking to the future.
Oh, do you like that? I'm already up to season 10 and this is just season 2. So anyway, it's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Carly.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely.
Now we've got to work out how to turn everything off now, don't we, Harry?
Well, we'll say goodbye.
We will say goodbye, darling. And I don't know which button to hit to say goodbye, so it's your turn to say goodbye. And see you next episode.
See you next episode, Sally.
Okay, bye. Wow, wasn't that another fantastic episode?
So much fun.
And Harry, none of this is possible without the fantastic help we've had from, take it away,
Shaquille Raymond, what a rock star audio engineer.
I like that. Martin Stevens, my husband, for his guitar prowess on the intros and outros. And Shani Power, who is doing all of the behind-the-scenes photos and design of everything to do with the Instagram posts. Thank you all so very much to help us get our podcast out.
We'll see you on the next one.
We will. It's been wonderful, Harry. Thanks, darling. Bye-bye.
Bye.